City Mayor Zohran Mamdani putting his campaign talk of affordability into action in his first days in office, scheduled to make an announcement in Brooklyn this afternoon after signing several executive orders yesterday. Pix 11's Angelo Bavaro joins us in studio with a breakdown of all of this. He is really sort of like hard charging into that agenda that he set up during his campaign.
Yeah, Kirsten, good morning. A lot to keep track of already on that schedule.
I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of the Mayor of the City of New York.
Of the office of the Mayor of the City of New York.
Sworn in by Vermont Senator and fellow Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders on the steps of City Hall, Zohran Mamdani, the rapper turned Queens Assemblyman, is now Mayor of New York City. He's the first Muslim mayor, an immigrant mayor, and at 34 years old, the youngest mayor in generations.
Where else could a Muslim kid like me grow up eating bagels and lox every Sunday?
For a man who barnstormed into office on the back of big promises like free buses, universal childcare, and rent freezes, Mamdani, a generationally talented orator, did not plead for patience with those pledges.
The only expectation I seek to reset is that of small expectations. Beginning today, we will govern expansively and audaciously.
Then he explicitly doubled down.
We will deliver universal child care for the many by taxing the wealthiest few. We will freeze the rent. We will make those buses fast and free.
Also sworn in during the ceremony was new Comptroller Mark Levine and public advocate Jumaane Williams, who was moved to tears reflecting on what it would be like to pass a message to his younger self.
You were enough. You were always enough.
More broadly speaking, the inauguration was just as much about new leadership as it was about sending a message that Democratic socialist leadership might be the best hope for Democrats to reach working class people struggling to get by and who've been turning to President Trump and Republicans in recent years.
I was elected as a Democratic socialist, and I will govern as a Democratic socialist.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, often floated as a potential Democratic presidential nominee in 2028, echoed that broader national implication of Mayor Mamdani.
We have chosen this path because we know that it's the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do, and that if we can make it here, we can make it anywhere.
When did this happen?
I can't remember exactly the year.
The year?
More than years.
Mayor Zohran Mamdani inspecting broken floor tiles in an apartment on Clarkson Avenue in Prospect Lefferts Gardens, getting a first-hand look at the deteriorating conditions, from an eroding bathtub surface to a rust-covered, corroded bathroom pipe and red paint splashed about.
And you told the landlord about this?
Yes.
And what was the response?
Called some numbers, but nobody want to do anything about it.
Residents in this same building and in others owned by the landlord Pinnacle Realty say they've experienced similar conditions, from leaking bathroom ceilings to moldy drywall. Tenant unions rallying in response, demanding stronger tenant protections.
We are the tenants. We are the tenants.
On his first day in office, Mamdani made his first major policy announcement, signing 3 executive orders aimed at protecting tenants and fast-tracking housing across the city. He said this building, along with 92 others owned by the same landlord, is currently in bankruptcy proceedings and set to be auctioned off to a new owner, one who also ranks among the city's worst landlords.
In those buildings alone, there are more than 5,000 open hazardous violations and 14,000 complaints. This is an untenable situation. So today we are announcing that we will be taking action in the bankruptcy case, stepping in to represent the interests of the city and the interests of the tenants and say once and for all who this government will be fighting for.
The mayor also reestablishing the city's office to protect tenants with a mission to defend tenants' rights and intervene quickly when they face illegal living conditions. It's a step that gives tenants like Mildred Ross hope.
To hear this executive order is something we're really excited about.
City Mayor Zohran Mamdani putting his campaign talk of affordability into action in his first days in office, scheduled to make an announcement in Brooklyn this afternoon after signing several executive orders yesterday. Pix 11's Angelo Bavaro joins us in studio with a breakdown of all of this. He is really sort of like hard charging into that agenda that he set up during his campaign.
Yeah, Kirsten, good morning. A lot to keep track of already on that schedule. Let's talk about what happened yesterday. We do not know what today's announcement will be just yet. That is set for 2:15 at Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn. Mayor Mamdani getting right to work after his public swearing in yesterday, signing 3 executive orders tackling housing. So take a look. The mayor also putting that issue in focus by doing this, touring an apartment in Prospect Lefferts Gardens yesterday, where tenants are reporting, as you can see, some poor living conditions. One of those executive orders will revitalize the mayor's office to protect tenants, and 2 other ones will establish new task forces aimed at speeding up housing construction, getting people into homes faster, and increasing supply by identifying suitable city-owned properties. And it's not just housing. In that inauguration speech, Mayor Mamdani doubling down on those other campaign promises.
You will deliver universal child care for the many by taxing the wealthiest few. We will freeze the rent. We will make those buses fast and free.
On top of all that, Mayor Mamdani also signing 2 other executive orders yesterday, one of those establishing the structure and the operations of the new administration, including 5 deputy mayors, and that other one revoking all executive orders issued on or after September 26, 2024. That day, former Mayor Eric Adams was federally indicted. Now, Mayor Mamdani's office says that move ensures a fresh start. Again, we are expecting another announcement from the new mayor this afternoon around 2:15 p.m. And he will also take reporter questions, so we should hear a lot about his next steps as he continues to set his ambitious agenda, Kirsten.
Yeah, interesting to see him take down the executive orders that Mayor Adams had put in place, sort of, I see your executive order, I revoke your executive order.
Exactly.
It's interesting times as this all starts to play out. Just
a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, good stuff.
Day 2, and Mayor Zohran Mamdani continues to move through the city like something of a rock star. Friday, he announced the creation of an Office of Mass Engagement and appointed Tasha Van Auken to lead it, the woman who led his extensive field operation during the campaign. Mamdani says New Yorkers must feel their government is taking feedback seriously.
Judge us by whether engagement changes outcomes.
But the new mayor is already facing questions and criticism after he undid an executive order from Mayor Eric Adams, who changed the city's definition of anti-Semitism. Adams made the definition in line with the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, which states some forms of Israel criticism are anti-Semitic. The official account of the mayor also appears to have deleted some tweets related to the issue. And now the Trump Justice Department Civil Rights Division says it will investigate.
Protecting Jewish New Yorkers is going to be a focus of my administration. And I also know that a number of leading Jewish organizations have immense concerns around this definition.
Mamdani is keeping the mayor's office on combating anti-Semitism. And on this weekend's episode of Picks on Politics, I asked Comptroller Mark Levine, a citywide Jewish official, about these issues.
I do support the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which in my view is balanced and does allow for nuance. It does not stipulate that all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, but it defines cases where it does cross the line. But the mayor has said repeatedly that he's very, very committed to combating anti-Semitism. I'm optimistic that we will meet those high standards, and I'll be here to make sure that we do.
Going to be called rental ripoff hearings, and they're going to be held across the 5 boroughs in the next 100 days, the first 100 days of Mayor Mamdani's administration, a chance for tenants to voice all their complaints. Now, the mayor made the announcement this morning at a news conference up in the Bronx, and he says it's going to be the way for him to understand what are the issues involving tenants and landlords, and if there's a way to introduce relevant policy to improve the situation and make more affordable housing in the city. Now, at the same news conference, the new mayor announced the appointment of Dina Levy. She'll be head of the City Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development. She has a very long history with tenants. She previously or currently works for the State Department of Homes and Community Renewal.
Let this moment be evidence of what our new future will look like. A city where New Yorkers can turn to their leaders and see that they now have champions who care about them, listen to them, and wake up every morning honored to work for them.
And I do know that the work ahead will be hard. We will need to increase the resources to build more affordable housing. We will need to try new, innovative, and sometimes scary innovations in order to overcome this crisis. And in many respects, we will need to embrace a willingness to rethink how we do business.
And Pix 11 spoke to several tenants walking by. They're asking why we're here. I say there's going to be a series of hearings if they have any complaints about their landlords. And of course, you know they do. We are live on the Lower East Side. McGee Hickey, Pix 11 News.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for taking some time to sit with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for coming.
It's 1 week since your inauguration. There's a lot happening. Let's hop into it with the joint child care announcement that you just had with Governor Kathy Hochul, fixing 3K and expanding child care to 2-year-olds over the next 4 years, about 2,000 seats by the fall, you're promising. When will every New Yorker have a seat for their 2-year-old if they want it?
By the end of this term. By the end of my first term as the mayor of New York City, every single 2-year-old will have a seat. And what we are doing right now is fulfilling the dream at the heart of the campaign we just ran, which was about delivering universal child care for New Yorkers. And today, the governor and I stood together as we announced a $1.21 billion commitment. And as you said, it's not just about delivering child care for 2-year-olds, it's also about fixing child care for 3-year-olds, because there have been families with a 3-year-old who've been offered a seat only to find out that while they live in Flatbush, the seat is in Astoria. And what we want to do is actually make it possible for them to take that seat, use that seat, and that's what these fixes are going to make real.
Why expand in this way? And let me explain what I mean.
Please.
I'm a parent of 2 young boys I'm raising in Brooklyn, and generally what we do, a lot of my parent friends try to do, is keep people at the same daycare from, let's say, 6 months all the way up till 3K. So why just begin by expanding only 2-year seats as opposed to expanding babies all the way to 2s all at one time?
So we've been doing a number of investigations and also conversations internally within our city government, and found that the best way to fulfill universal child care is by staggering the implementation and aging it down. And we have 3K in this city, child care for 3-year-olds that we're not only fixing, but to actually bring that also to child care for 2-year-olds. And then to continue to build that out so that children as young as 6 weeks can have child care without parents having to worry about $22,500 a year as an expense.
Also happening today, you have Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in town on the heels of this fatal shooting in Minneapolis with an ICE agent that has a lot of attention right now. But she called you out directly, which is what I want you to respond to. Quote, please. He is standing with illegal people who've broken our laws before putting New York City first. Your response?
Well, I'm not sure what she's actually referring to in that statement, because what I've been doing is standing up for each and every New Yorker across this city as the mayor of this city. And what I will not do, however, is differentiate New Yorkers on the basis of their documentation. If you live here, I am your mayor. And that is what we have been showing over these last 8 days, is a commitment to making this city more affordable for every single person who calls it home.
Her primary focus here in town was talking about the takedown of dozens of people she says are in the country illegally and affiliated with gangs. And she also encouraged you and the NYPD to work with them on those criminal prosecution efforts. Will your NYPD work with ICE on that level?
My NYPD will follow the law here in New York City. And the law as we have it with our sanctuary city policies allows for city government to work with the federal administration when it comes to 170 or so serious crimes if someone has been convicted of them. What it does not allow for, however, is civil enforcement or the assistance of a federal administration's attempt to fulfill its pledge to create the single largest deportation force in American history. And what I've said directly to the president, as well as what I've said to New Yorkers across the city, is that these ICE raids, they are cruel and inhumane. They do nothing to actually further the cause of public safety.
And on the issue of people protesting these ICE raids, especially after what happened in Minneapolis, we've already seen smaller protests, I believe a bigger one's actually planned for this evening. Will the strategic response group within the NYPD still be responding to protests? I know you've had some serious concerns about this, but obviously not a lot of time yet to implement that change.
I continue to share those concerns around the strategic response groups, and I continue to be committed to creating a new police response to the exercising of First Amendment rights. And what it comes back to is that this was a unit that was created initially to respond as part of counterterrorism efforts. That does not need to be conflated with the response to New Yorkers using their First Amendment rights. And so what we need to do is both keep those rights as a sanctity in New York City and keep New Yorkers safe, and I'm confident we'll be able to do that.
But as of right now tonight, there's a big protest. Will the SRG be out there because that's the option right now?
The first response that we'll have from the NYPD will be that of community affairs.
On buses, we actually just sat down with the governor today. As you know, we were just talking about this before we got going. One of the things she said, notably on buses, unlike childcare, is she doesn't seem ready to move on it yet. She said it's not going to be in her State of the State address next week. It's not going to be in her budget. But she's not closing the door. Are you willing to wait a year if she says maybe next year, or are you going to move forward with some version of free buses before then?
I'm always going to advocate for our agenda, and the fact of it is that this is a critical issue because 1 in 5 New Yorkers couldn't afford to ride the bus, and that was before it was $3. So what we need to do is show those New Yorkers that they still have a place in the city, and I'll always keep making the case to our governor and to everyone in the city as to why that's an important thing.
But how do you do something without her support on this particular issue at the intersection of the MTA? In your budget, do you say, here's the money, let's do it now?
Well, I think some of this is a hypothetical that I hope not to arrive to. And I will keep making that case because we're very early in the budget process. And I also think what New Yorkers want to see is the continued fulfillment of the agenda. And today's a great day to be chatting with you because that's what we did with childcare, and now we continue to do it with the other promises of freezing the rent for rent-stabilized tenants and making buses fast and free.
On housing, and I promise there's a more direct housing question coming because I know this has been arguably your first move in office. Right after the inauguration, you went and you passed a number or signed a number of executive orders, but you also appointed Sia Weaver to the Office of Tenant Protections. She compared home ownership as a tool of white supremacy. You said you would keep her on because of the good work that you feel that she is doing. But what do you think of the comment itself, drawing a line between landlords and white supremacists?
Obviously, that's not an opinion that I share. And I made the decision to have her as our executive director of the mayor's office to protect tenants, not because of her comments, but because of her work. She is someone who has won significant victories for tenants, not just in New York City, but across the entirety of the state, formative part of what was an upstate, downstate coalition. And we've seen her already hard at work in this past week. She's someone who has been a core part of our efforts to coordinate rental ripoff hearings across the city, as well as informing tenants of their rights in a city where oftentimes they're not made aware of them.
You've been focused a lot on tenant protection and building new housing. What efforts has your office already made on reaching out to distressed landlords, particularly rent control, or those with rent control units that say they're distressed, that they want to help you in your mission to lower rents and stabilize rents, but they just can't afford their buildings right now?
So this is a key part of the portfolio of our Deputy Mayor for Housing and Planning, Layla Bozarg. And in addition to putting together what is our housing plan over the course of this year, she is also hard at work at developing out how we can both provide relief to tenants and also address whatever issues that landlords may have.
On mental health, an issue we haven't heard too much from you yet, and I get it, it's been a week, so right. You know, how soon can you get things done, right? But you've talked about having essentially a small army of community health professionals at outposts around the city. When will we see a launch of that initiative?
So that is something that is currently the subject of discussions within our city hall and our city government. What I can tell you is we've already begun interviews for positions within the Department of Community Safety, and this continues to be a focus for us because while we celebrate the record drops in a number of serious crime categories here in New York City, we also know that we need to make it such that police officers can focus on policing and not have to respond to 200,000 mental health calls on an annual basis. That's at the heart of the Department of Community Safety. It's a commitment to addressing the mental health crisis as well as the homeless homelessness crisis in the city.
In the interim, and you were talking about this at police headquarters the other day, will police continue to respond to the majority of mental health calls, at least at this point?
I think in the interim, as we set this up, we will continue with the policies that we have while always asking ourselves, what else can we do, even as we are building a more medium and long-term strategy.
You spoke with the president after what happened in Venezuela with Nicolas Maduro brought here to New York City. Why did you choose that to be your first call to him as mayor, as opposed to, let's say, something that's happening with ICE right now, or an infrastructure project that many New Yorkers may feel on a broader scale? Why Venezuela?
Well, I wanted to make clear to the president directly that these were the thoughts that I had, and they were also the thoughts that I was about to share with the world. And this is not just an action taken by a federal administration abroad, it's also an action that then implicates New York City. Because right now Nicolas Maduro is here in New York City, and my job as the mayor of New York City is to ensure that any federal action has a limited impact, if any, on the day-to-day lives of New Yorkers.
Do you feel he was receptive to some of the concerns you expressed? Was it a productive conversation, or did he hear you and say thanks, goodbye? How did it go?
It was a direct conversation where I shared exactly how I felt, and it was a brief one where we both understood exactly where we stood, and I appreciated that.
On anti-Semitism, you undid a change Mayor Adams made to change the definition of anti-Semitism, and the change you made was to say that certain forms of criticizing Israel can be construed as anti-Semitism. You, and in fact many Jews themselves, don't necessarily agree with that. My question is this, though. Do you plan on rolling out your own executive order on anti-Semitism, some of the things you'd like to see done, and a definition that you think is more acceptable?
You know, I think at the core of this has to be the work that we actually do. And that work is going to be typified by the way in which we actually combat anti-Semitism. In another executive order, we showcased our commitment to retain the mayor's office to combat anti-Semitism. We've also spoken about commitments to increase hate crime prevention programming by 800%, because too often our response to anti-Semitism is after the fact, as opposed to thinking about preemptively what we can do to prevent it. And I think, as you said, the definition that the previous mayor, had instituted through an executive order was one that even the individual who wrote that definition in the first place had real concerns about whether it could ever be workable. And we want to make sure that we take on the crisis of anti-Semitism and we don't diminish it by conflating it with legitimate critique of the state of Israel.
About a minute left here, so one more serious question and then a fun one at the end. But writ large, you used a lot of executive orders so far, more in the first week than Mayor Adams did in the first 3 months. Is there any concern that you're expanding executive power in a way that New Yorkers may not like, that they just see you doing it without the state or without the city council? Is that a consideration as you sign these executive orders?
What I've actually seen is that New Yorkers are hungry for a city government that moves at the pace that they do. And we're seeing that for far too long we've treated the tools within government as something that could gather dust, as opposed to something that should be used to make life easier and more affordable in the nation's most expensive city. And I'm proud of the fact that in 8 days we've issued more than 11 executive orders, because it's part and parcel of an administration that's hitting the ground running.
Let's talk about bagels, my favorite food.
Come on.
You mentioned them during the inauguration. You said only in a city like New York could a Muslim kid like you grow up eating bagels and lox on Sunday. So now, as the mayor of New York, what makes for a great bagel?
Okay. I mean, my favorite kind of bagel is a bagel and lox. And I also I'm a sucker of pairing it with some pulp. Tropicana is just how I grew up. I have to tell you that recently I had a bagel and lox from Apollo Bagels, not too far from here. Very good.
Yeah? What about as far as, like, are you looking for like crackly outside or a little softer or a denser inside? What as far as the bagel itself?
I'm looking for crackle, I would say.
I am too, and I can't find a good one.
I grew up poppy seed bagel, scallion cream cheese, absolute bagels. I know they've reopened under new management. I'm excited to try it out. But I think, to me, you can't really tell the story of New York City without telling the story of our bagels.
So I'll have to give Apollo a try. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Indeed, the two of them very much closely entwined here. These are words that we've heard before about taxing the rich. Mayor Zohran Mamdani making a budget announcement Wednesday at City Hall, saying we have a $12 billion budget gap over 2 years. And he's blaming it all on former political foes, Mayor Eric Adams and Governor Andrew Cuomo. Mayor Zohran Mamdani making a budget announcement Wednesday at City Hall, saying we have a $12 billion budget gap over 2 years.
The gross fiscal mismanagement has left New Yorkers with a bill the likes of which we have not seen in many, many years.
He called the problem the Adams budget crisis. The solution, tax the rich. Mamdani again calling for more taxes on any households pulling down more than $1 million in income here in New York City, saying if they paid an extra 2%, it would cover the hole in the budget left behind by the Adams administration. Mamdani going even deeper and blaming former Governor Cuomo for not giving the city its due in tax revenue, saying the city is owed $8 billion for a 12-year period reaching back to 2010.
That means looking inward into savings and efficiencies. That also means raising taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers and the most profitable corporations. And it means recalibrating the relationship with the state.
As for the criticism that taxes will push businesses and the rich to flee to other lesser taxed states, the mayor says he's more concerned about working people leaving the city due to high costs. Mamdani insisting funny math is to blame, that former Mayor Eric Adams underestimated known expenses so he could show a balanced budget for 2026. Adams blasting Mamdani, saying in part, "I didn't leave a budget hole. I left over $8 billion in reserves. Only someone who can't read a balance sheet would call that a crisis." Now, Governor Hochul has consistently shot down any more taxes on high-income city dwellers. Yesterday, reiterating her stance that more tax money will flow from Wall Street this year, the state has increased funding for the city, and that we, the city, need to cut costs in order to make that budget work. The city's budget will be presented on February 17th, so it will certainly be interesting to see how this all plays out and whether or not we are able to sort of make these numbers work.
9:34 right now, and Mayor Zohran Mamdani has painted a grim picture for New York City's budget, which now has a $12 billion budget deficit to fill. Mayor Mamdani pointing the finger at previous administrations while saying that he will deliver an on-time, balanced budget on February 17th. So the question is, how? The mayor is joining me now live to talk about this and make an announcement. Mr. Mayor, great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Thank you for having me.
Of course, and great to have you here in studio. I think it's your first as mayor, so it's great to have you here. And before we get to the announcement and the budget, I do want to talk about what we saw play out in Brooklyn last night at the synagogue there. Any indication as the investigation plays out that that individual is looking to commit a hate crime?
So that's currently being investigated. And I have to say, I was there on the scene last night at 770 Chabad World Headquarters, and it was a horrifying incident where a man repeatedly and intentionally crashed his car into the building. And I am so thankful that no one was hurt. And we know that this is a building that has immense meaning to so many Jewish New Yorkers and those across the world. And yesterday's attack also took place on the yard site of Rabbi Schneerson and the leadership of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. And this is just a day after the day when we remember the victims of the Holocaust. And we know that anti-Semitism is not simply something of the past to be learned about. It is a living, breathing thing that we have to combat every day.
Today, the City Council is expected to announce a task force to fight anti-Semitism. And the question is for you is, have you found somebody to lead your own office to combat anti-Semitism within the mayor's office? When can we expect to see that up and running?
So we are actually in our final interviews for that position. And that is going to be a key position that delivers on our commitment to root out anti-Semitism across the 5 boroughs and make this a city where Jewish New Yorkers are not just safe, but frankly celebrated and cherished.
Sometime next week?
We're working on the timeline, but it is in the final stages.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. And you are here today to talk about the big announcement, which is a $12 billion deficit. You said the city has not seen something like this since the Great Depression. You said you were given a poisoned chalice by previous administrations. So on behalf of so many New Yorkers who heard that noise and that news, what is the answer to bring that budget now on time and on budget?
So I think first, as you said, this is a $12 billion fiscal deficit, right? The last time New Yorkers saw a fiscal crisis anywhere close to this was the Great Recession. And yet this actually eclipses that. This is of a greater deficit than we saw at that time. It's going to require an all-of-the-above approach. So we've said it will require the city's relationship with the state changing. What I mean by that is today, the city contributes 54.5% of the state's revenue, receives 40.5% in return. The second is going to require a relationship change between the city and its wealthiest residents and most profitable corporations. I've spoken a lot with you across New York City about how I think we should raise income taxes on those who make $1 million or more by 2%, how we should raise corporate taxes on the most profitable corporations. The third thing it's also going to require is the city pursuing savings and efficiencies within its own operating budget. And so that is something that I'm actually here to speak to you today about also, is the creation of savings officers within every single agency that will be tasked with assessing the efficacy of programs we have, the efficiencies that we currently have or are being denied, and what steps we need to take to make the kinds of changes to bring us back to a firm financial.
And you want that done yesterday, so you have an executive order that you're calling all city agencies to do right now and implementing and appointing these chief savings officers.
Yes, and that's actually the executive order that I have with me right here. This is a directive that within 5 days, every single agency head has to identify a chief savings officer, and then within 45 days, those officers have to come back to us with a full assessment of the savings that could be pursued, the efficiencies that we're currently seeing, and the programs that frankly need to be sunsetted or are not effective.
Okay, so go ahead, put your John Hancock on that. And that will become officially an executive order as of this moment, right?
Yes, this is now an executive order, the first to be signed on Pix 11.
There we go. So let me ask you what exactly that means. The previous administration, Eric Adams, he cut from city agencies. For example, libraries were cut, right? Are you expecting agencies to look at some of these things and implement cuts, and how soon?
I think what we're first talking about are efficiencies and savings. We're talking about the things that we could be doing better.
But is that semantics?
No, I would say cuts are a matter of last resort, right? We do not want to be cutting the services that New Yorkers are relying on. If the state does not change its relationship to the city, if it does not raise taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers or the most profitable corporations, then all that leaves the city with are the most painful tools. However, we want to do everything we can to ensure that those are not the tools we have to use.
But cuts could be on the table as a last resort.
That is what we are left with if we are not able to change these relationships. That's why we're pursuing the relationship.
You talked a lot about Eric Adams and former Governor Andrew Cuomo, but the City Council was also involved in the budget-making process. Governor Kathy Hochul had 4 years to kind of implement some changes to Governor Cuomo's budgets. Do you look at that as part of the reason we're in this crisis, that there was failure on all levels?
I see the architects of this crisis as being the prior mayor and the prior governor. I think that there have been steps taken in the past few years, especially under Governor Hochul's leadership, to change some of that cost sharing between the city and the state. It's not been an exercise in cruelty towards the city coffers that we saw for about a decade. However, there's more that needs to be done. And what we have now for the first time in a long time is a directive from our own city hall, from myself, to go to Albany and be honest and direct about what we need from Albany. That's what we're going to do.
What about President Trump? Does he play a part in this crisis?
Well, I think President Trump has said himself in the Oval Office right after we had a meeting that the better New York City does, the happier he is. And what we've seen is that right now New York City is in need of a change in its fiscal relationship with a number of the things I've listed, but also needs to be protected from some of the federal policies that are being put forward. And I've been honest about the fact that some of these proposals, they would devastate our city, and we're going to fight them with everything that we have.
In the last couple days or weeks, have you had a conversation with President Trump about what he's willing to send to New York or withhold from New York as you go into the budget talks and negotiations now? Knowing what you're going to get from the federal government is huge. So have you spoken to the president?
So I keep those conversations between the president and myself private. What I will tell you, however,
when's the last time you spoke to him?
Look, those are conversations that will always come back to New York City.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that New Yorkers are expecting from me. And what they also know is that in a city of 8.5 million people, the wealthiest city in the wealthiest country in the world, we have 1 in 4 living in poverty. We have to find fiscal policy that lifts us all up.
What is your contingency? As you made that announcement, an hour later, Governor Hochul came out and she said, newsflash, we're not raising taxes in New York. So you had these conversations with the governor a number of times. You're very complimentary to her, but she is adamant that they're not raising taxes. So if you don't get that money, what is the contingency?
Well, I think the first key thing is to make clear to New Yorkers why we need that money, how we got to this place. And some of this are the structural imbalances we've seen in our city's fiscal health over many years. It would be all too easy to try and fix this budget only to get here next year. That's why we're looking for solutions that will last in the longer term, recurring ones, annualized ones. And so we're talking about these increased taxes on the wealthy. We're talking about this. Look, I think politics is also an exercise in making the case and making clear what the stakes are, right? The tools that the city has, these are the most painful tools. We are talking about cuts, we are talking about property taxes, the things that I do not want to pursue.
Yeah.
And yet the scale of this fiscal crisis of $12 billion, this is not an ordinary crisis. This is not a mayor coming forward and saying it's going to be a tough budget. This is the likes of which we haven't seen since the Great Recession. That requires an all-of-the-above approach. That's what we're going to make clear.
So realistic talk, and you mentioned yesterday a number of times that you want to be really honest with New Yorkers and letting them know how we got to this point and what you're planning to do about it. But there's also a lot that you campaigned on, freezing the rent, free, fast and free buses. Could some of that take longer to implement, realistically talking, because of what we're seeing?
I think this is a fiscal crisis that has to be front of mind for all of us. Now, I'm proud of the fact that we've already been able to advance our affordability agenda in the 1 month I've been in office. Day 8, we secured more than $1 billion for universal child care. Freezing the rent is not something that requires a fiscal infusion. It's a decision from the Rent Guidelines Board. Making buses fast and free, the fast thing we're already getting started on. And what I've said is that by the time I'm finished being mayor, they're going to be free. What we have to deliver, however, in this very year, required by law, but also required just by being a good mayor, a balanced budget for this fiscal year, for the next fiscal year.
I'm up against the clock here, but yesterday you mentioned an AI chatbot that cost $500,000 as one of the things you thought was a waste of money. Can you name something else?
That's exactly what this directive is about. What we want is to actually come to a number after looking at the budget, because what we're seeing, we're talking about a budget of more than $115 billion. Right? If I'm going to accuse the prior mayor of gross fiscal mismanagement in the budgeting process, we know that that likely extends to the expense side as well. And so we're going to look through every agency to find every example, because when we're going to ask New Yorkers to commit themselves to a new era of politics, we have to commit ourselves to. That's what this is about.
If the governor comes up and says, you know what, Mr. Mayor, I don't want to raise the taxes, but I do want to find money. We made all this money from Wall Street, which he said, and we found some money for you to give to you. Would that satisfy you?
I think that given the scale of this crisis, that's not going to be a way to cover the entirety of it. Look, I'll be direct with you.
Yeah.
We're encouraged by the results from Wall Street, by the news of bonuses. That would be something, if the deficit was smaller, I could say maybe this could cover it. But $12 billion, there's no news of bonuses or better forecasts that are going to get there. It's going to require everything.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate you coming here, talking straight with New Yorkers, signing the executive order. I think it's the first that we've had here at Pix 11 where legislation is signed right here on our air. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
You want to go do the weather?
Yeah.
No? Okay.
Stay warm, stay inside, stay safe.
There you go. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Hazel, over to you.